Morning, Jen. Hey, Isabella, how are you? Good morning. Good morning, good morning. Good morning to you. Boy, Mom in the house, it's true. I get one of each. It's very, very, what do you call it? It's hey, Nisa. We just lucked into it. We would have been happy either way. Could have been two girls, could have been a boy and a girl. Either way, it's all lovely. What is happening here with my coffee? Hold on, sorry, I'm struggling. Okay, I'm on the struggle bus. But guess what? I managed to do, the reason she's not on me right now is I managed to transfer the sleeping baby over to lay down next to her dad, so she can sleep a little longer. It's nice, right? Good stuff. She likes to sleep on her back now. That's her favorite. Or not, I mean her stomach really, but like her back or stomach. She sleeps in the ring sling still, as you saw yesterday, obviously. She slept for most of the work yesterday. But anyway, we'll see what happens. They're in there now cuddling. They're cuddling. Little cuddle bugs. How are you all doing? Anything interesting going on in your lives this week? We have baby class today, more planning for her birthday party. I should get my glasses, right? Does any Madison Beer just announced her tour? Oh, I don't know who that is, but it sounds exciting. Does anyone want to take a vote? I guess vote's the wrong word. Does anyone want to take bets? That's the word. Take bets on whether or not this child is going to make my eyesight worse, because my daughter made me need glasses for the first time in my life. Will this boy make them worse? I don't know. I mean, it's possible. Take your bets now, because I might need new glasses next year. We'll see. We shall see. It is a possibility. It's a very serious possibility. Hey, Roxy. I love how nonchalant your announcement was. Well, we're pretty much in this, like, we'll be in the second trimester by the end of this week. So, we were just being quiet about it, chill. Oh, that was a bad choice. That was a bad choice. It was a bad choice on my part. Bad Sasha work. Why did I do that? Why did I do that? Oh, man. Good morning, Mary. I was wondering when you said you were only having one cup of coffee date. You're right about that. You did that this morning, too. Why, Ray? Why? What is wrong with me? You didn't miss a different video, Grace. No, not at all. I came really close to overfilling it, but I didn't. Roxy, I haven't had a chance to try the music yet because she only woke up twice last night, and I was able to get her down pretty easily, so I was trying not to wake her up too much by doing anything different. if it was working. Look, I didn't overfill it. I almost did, but I didn't. I was going to tell you something and now I've forgotten. Oh well, it is what it is, I guess, right? But I do have your email, Roxy, so if we run into another day of sadness, you know, we can give it a go. Oh, gitchy, yeah, da, whatever. You know what's wild? How different our living room looks without the Christmas tree. Look at this, hold on. No Christmas tree. It's like a whole different world in here without the Christmas stuff. It's a great way to give routine. Yeah, we have a routine for bedtime for sure. We do. And the problem is never getting her to sleep the first time. It's getting her to fall back asleep when she wakes up or to not be sad when she wakes up. Her nighttime routine, getting her to sleep initially, is pretty flawless. We do a pretty good job with that. It's the other stuff that's difficult. It's the wake-ups that are difficult. And it's hard to have a routine with wake-ups because they're never the same. You know? That's the problem with those. So, you know what I did yesterday, you guys? I washed her whole little chair thing over here where we give her snacks. It was disgusting. I washed the whole thing. You should be proud of me. She's not in it right now, so I guess it's not really getting the use that it could. But yeah. All right, where are we? All right, so we are on page 149. We are clipping along beautifully in this wonderful story. I still have no idea where it's going, but I'm enjoying the style of the author, so you know, there's that. You guys should be proud of me. I've been trying to write like just at least a little bit every couple of days. I'm not getting a lot done because it's hard, you know, with a almost 1-year-old, but like a little bit, you know. So anyway, let's read. We're still on the same day, but it's a new scene. What day were we on? Hold on. We are on November 17th. But a new scene. Here we go. Let's get into it. A little is better than none. Exactly. A little writing is better than none. Congrats on your boy. How far along are you? We're just about to hit the second trimester at the end of this week. Yes. Thank you so much for the congratulations. Yeah, we lucked into one of each, although 2 girls would have been fine too. You know, we were not, yeah, a win is a win. Yeah, a win is a win. We weren't hoping for one way or another. We were really surprised that it's a boy because on both sides of our family, there's only one boy on each side. Out of all of the cousins, and they're plentiful. You know, she's got a lot of cousins, and there's not a lot of boys. So we're adding, you know, a second boy to each side, which is, it's kind of cute. So anyway, I have 2 more rows left to do on the blanket I'm crocheting. Oh, send pictures when you're done. I'd love to see that. That sounds lovely. Hey, Cindy, how are you? Boys are the best. Yeah, I mean, my nephews are lovely. So, you know, I don't have any complaints. You know, they're mama magnets. She's a mama magnet too, though, to be fair. Everyone always says that. Everyone's always like, oh, boys really love their mama. And I'm like, I feel like my daughter loves me quite a bit. She's a mommy fan. I'm trying to register to buy BTS tickets. Oh, is that what Anya's doing also? I bet that's where Anya is too. Yeah, I mean, I would love them no matter what they are, you know. He's, you know, he'll be whoever he's going to be. And we don't have a name for him yet, which is weighing on my soul because we named my daughter before we were even pregnant with her. We knew that we were going to use the name we chose for her, and we cannot settle on a boy name. Diaper changes are fun, but they get better. I've heard that. I've heard point down. Yeah. So yeah, that is, you know, just what that's just where we're at. We just don't have a name. You know, we can't settle on anything. We're having struggles with this one, I guess, because we didn't think we'd have a boy. Like, we had a second girl name picked out all ready to go, but it is what it is, right? If anyone has any suggestions, toss out your boy names, and we will take them into consideration. You know? Cindy, be so proud of me. I've been writing. Aaron's not a bad name. I'm not against the name Aaron. Yeah, Logan is a good name too. I like Logan. I don't think so, because our last name, I don't think a name like Braxton would work, just because we already have unique letters in our last name. So I don't think an X would work. I sound like open book level work me. Ooh. But we're, you know, like Aaron and Logan are in the realm of the names we're looking at. That is in the same vibe ish. I won't say the ones that are like on the top of the list or anything in case we end up choosing one of them, but that's definitely the vibe. Yeah. Oh, that's it. Deacon, maybe. I don't know if that would flow. We also have like family middle names we want to use, so I kind of want it to like flow with that. But Aaron and Logan are in the realm for sure. I'm so proud of you for writing again. Yes. Remind me to send you some of it. But let's get into reading. Yeah, Cindy, remind me to send you the first little things. You can kind of see where I'm headed with this. It's definitely different than I originally planned it to be, but I think it's cool. So if you remind me, I'll send you the first, like, I don't want to call it a chapter because it's not even complete, but like a thing that's like the vibe, if you will, like a vibe check, you know? Okay. Anyway, let's read because that's what we're here for. Let's do it. I ran full tilt down the mountainside, slipping and sliding all the way, and by the time I reached open the door, I was red-faced and panting. My nose was running horribly. I nearly collided with Bambley, who stood by the table in a dressing gown, looking forlorn. Finn hasn't been by with breakfast, he told me. Rumpled golden hair completed the picture of indolence in his gaze swept over my pack. Oh, Sylvian Pestetterie made bread? Have you seen the marmalade? They've taken someone, I said, somehow managing not to beat him over the head with Poe's concoction. Someone from the village. Yes, I did rather think so, he said, and that brought me up short. I didn't waste breath asking how he knew, as I would not waste it questioning Poe as to why he wanted a mortal to shovel his lawn. But when I have seen him tiptoeing nimbly over the snow... When? I asked. In the night, he said unhelpfully. And before you ask, no, I don't know who it was, God, but I hate singing folk. Did you not hear it? Perhaps odd, fiendish candles work after all. Bloody caterwauling racket. Give me the bells and the lutes of my own hall and hang any pompous minstrels who open their mouths to sully them. He looked at me. Marmalade, please. Something of my feelings must have shown in my face, for he fell back a step, hand raised in a warding away motion. Abandoning the bread, I turned and ran back out into the winter. When I crashed through the doors of the tavern, I found nearly half of the village gathered there with odd fielding questions in Lostlander. None of them had any interest in foreign bystanders in a moment of crisis, and my arrival was largely ignored. Cursing my lack of fluency, I managed to find Finn in the crowd, and he pulled me aside to translate the situation. It was Lila. Of course it was Lila, the village beauty who could fell trees and cleave firewood as easily as she drew breath. They said that she'd been traveling back to Hrafsnik with her beloved, a milliner's daughter named Margaret, who lived in the town of Selbear. They had been taken together, the horse that they rode wandering back to its yard before dawn, saddle empty and askew. The other horses had been sent into a frothing panic when it had been stabled among them, a telltale sign of a brush with the tall ones. A search party was being organized grimly, and Lila's mother, Johanna, who had lost her husband to drowning only a year previously, was being looked after by Thora and her helpers, being nearly insensible with grief. Finn then asked me quietly if there was anything that I could do, given my vast knowledge of the folk, but unfortunately Odd chose that moment to conclude her address and join us by the fire, and with the two of them gazing at me with desperate shadows of hope, I could only promise to think about it. As I left, Odd entreated me to confer with Bambley. I could tell from the look that she gave me she was not foolish enough to hope for a disinterested aid from one of the folk, but was willing to offer in exchange
whatever was within her power. The loss of 2 youths, both barely turning 20, weighed heavily upon this village. Indeed, when I returned to the cottage, I found Bambley dressed and breakfast, victuals having been delivered by one of Christian's farmhands. But far from raring to join the search, he was sitting there. I recounted what I had learned at the tavern, and he listened politely, a result, I suspect, of my earlier mood rather than some newfound benevolence on his part. Odd is willing to pay you for your assistance, I said bluntly. Oh? He looked amused. Am I to take this as an offer of monetary value, or will she deliver to my door a sheep born of cow whose wool turns to silver in the moonlight, or some such random thing? I think she'll give you whatever you want if it's hers to offer, and it won't endanger her or others. I spoke in a careful style in which I am given to negotiate with the folk, which he seemed to recognize with a kind of weary amusement. Hey, Sloth, good morning. He gave a dismissive lift of his eyebrows and turned his gaze back to the fire. I abandoned caution and spoke to him with my usual manner. Wendell, be more forthcoming, please. Are you barred somehow from interfering in the sport of your kind, or no? He said thoughtfully. And they're not my kind, not particularly. All these silly categorizations devised by mortal minds are about as useful as the names given to the wind. If you want the truth, I don't know if it's in my power to rescue our young lovers, and I have no desire to risk my neck trying. Why do you wish to risk yours? You don't care about these people. Surprise dawned in his face. Or do you? You feel something for Maud and Oslog, I think. Can it be my cold-blooded friend has come to value the society of these people? I opened my mouth to give him the retort that he expected, to say that I was motivated by scholarship pure and simple, and that the opportunity to investigate this bizarre ritual was of a magnitude greater than any I had been presented with before in terms of ramifications of our understanding the folk. That was entirely true, but for some reason, it made me feel unaccountably lonesome. I looked over the yard, and I could see the axe where Lila had left it, impaled in the stump she had taken to coming by nearly every day to restock our supply. It was such a bleak sight that I looked away quickly. Yes, I felt something. I'm no monster, but I would go after them for their sakes alone if there were no scientific discoveries to even be had. No, I probably wouldn't. My life has been one long succession of moments in which I have chosen rationality over empathy to shut away my feelings and strike off on some intellectual quest, and I have never regretted these choices, but rarely have they stared me in the face as bluntly as they did just then. I love seeing your face. Oh, thank you so much. Life is good. Yes, thank you for asking. Why don't we just pretend? He said, sparing me from articulating any of this, and I blinked at him. He went on. We would not have to go anywhere. Let us just take a sled a little distance into this godforsaken wilderness, camp out for a night or two, and return with tales of the fantastic revelry. Together, we could invent a convincing narrative, no doubt. The villagers would not sorrow much over our failure. Surely they've already guessed their daughters are lost. We'll accept their gratitude for trying, and then we shall go off to the ICODEF and be showered with praise for being the first scholars to empirically document an encounter with the courtly fae of Lost Land. I shall get my funding. You will make a name for yourself. Your cherished tenure will follow there soon after. Do you know who was recently appointed to the hiring committee? He folded his hands and then he smiled at me. I held his gaze. I will not lie and say I wasn't tempted by his suggestion. It would be an easy scheme to carry out, an exceptionally easy one to get away with. I was too practical not to talk through my concerns before ruling the idea out completely. You have already earned a reputation for falsifying research, I said. Would such dramatic claims not fall under suspicion? Well, that's where you come in, my dear M. Your reputation is spotless. No one would believe that you would participate in a ruse of this magnitude, of any magnitude. You will launder my reputation most efficiently. I believed him, but it didn't take me more than a moment to make my decision. Perhaps I didn't care, could not care, as much as I should for the fate of 2 youths, but I was also not someone who would put glory before discovery, empty praise before enlightenment. This was about the encyclopedia, but it was also about something greater than that, the thing that drove me to create the encyclopedia in the first place. We don't know for certain that Lila and Margaret are lost, I said, and he gave a groan and pressed his hands into his face. I waited. If you wish, he said from between his fingers, I will help you. I carefully examined him, for I'm used to dealing in fairy bargains and could recognize one in his voice, and yet it was a fairy bargain with only one side, a singular thing indeed. I could not comprehend his motivations. I wish it, I said. Shall I say it 3 times? I suppose you might as well, you infernal creature. So I did. Wonderful, he replied sourly. Well, don't expect me to help with the packing. I'm doing this against my own better judgment, and if the provisions prove inadequate, I'm turning the whole mad expedition around. Okay, so this is interesting. There's 2 lost girls from the village, and she has somehow convinced him to just help of his own accord. So off they go on an adventure to find them, a courtly fairy and a mortal woman. And I just got coffee up my nose. Cute. Very cute. Good job, Sash. Gross. All right, well, we're gonna keep going and we're gonna see what's happening with these folks. 18th November. The provisions were more than adequate. The entire village came together in a towering display of generosity and efficiency. By 9 o'clock this morning, we had 2 horses, a sleigh stocked with enough food, firewood, blankets, and assorted comforts to last us days. Somehow, one of the women found time to knit a jacket for Shadow, which, combined with the other gifts, left me unaccountably flustered given my companion's size. This would have taken, well, hours. Bambley and I entertained ourselves at the cottage by coaxing recalcitrant Shadow into his new raiment. We're learning new words all the time here, folks. Which was patterned with flowers and equipped with a jaunty little hood. The dog hung his head in abject embarrassment until his tormentors deigned to relieve him of this woolen pillory, and he spent the next hour pointedly ignoring me. What a sentence. Woolen pillory. Relieve him of his woolen pillory. Fortunately, the path taken by Lila and Margaret into the wilderness was clear, for it had not snowed since their abduction, and sailors believed the skies would remain clear for another day or so. As the villagers readied our provisions, Bambley and I hiked up to the spring one last time. Poe had made little progress with his tree through the snow and was scattered with soot that he had shoveled from the interior. Bambley exclaimed in displeasure at the sight of this venerable old tree reduced to a husk. Frost blasted, he muttered. Disrespectful bloody boggles. Before Poe or I could speak, he touched the tree, and it was healed, ruddy with health, and radiant with greenery against the winter pallor. Poe gave a cry and fell sharp onto his knees before Bambley, trembling, which the latter took no notice of whatsoever. And when Poe brought him a magnificent loaf as a thank you present, Bambley said rudely, "Oh, I'm sick to death of bread. Bring me something that will keep me warm in this hellish place." Can he do that? I asked after Poe was scrambling back to his tree home, from which he arose with a queer chorus of clanging and scraping and sort of a bubbling noise. Bambley only waved his hand and went back to his sulking. Poe then reappeared an hour later with a basket woven from willow boughs covered with a coarse wool blanket. Bambley accepted it ungraciously and without even glancing at the contents, even though whatever was beneath the wool steamed intriguingly. I had to take the basket away from him and found in it 6 glazed cakes, not unlike those that I have seen Lostlanders consume on special occasions. These would continue to steam until eaten. Poe answered my questions with something approaching good nature, his black eyes a little damp as his fingers lovingly stroked the roots of his tree. They were simple enough. Where had the Tall Ones taken the girls? To the place where the aurora bleeds white. What do the Tall Ones fear most? Fire. Waste of a question, Bambley said as we departed. They are of ice and snow. What else would they be afraid of but fire? Thank you for your advice, I said, though I note you waited to volunteer that information until after its usefulness had passed. What do you think is the place where the aurora bleeds white? I don't know, but I simply cannot wait to find out. You did not ask your 3rd question. How observant you are. In truth, I couldn't have articulated why I withheld the third question apart from intuition that would be important later. It is an intuition that I have come to trust, for if you spend enough time studying the folk, you become aware of how their behavior follows the ancient warp and weft of stories to feel the way that the pattern is unfolding before you. Hey, Brittany, good morning. The third question is always the most important one. The laden sleigh, drawn by two of the hardy, shaggy Lostlander horses, awaited us in the village. The horses were white, which struck me as an omen of something, though I couldn't guess if it was a good or bad one. These were no ordinary horses, but beasts used to picking their way over the countryside laden with drifting snow and even clambering up mountains. Odd surprised me before our departure by giving me a hug and kissing both of my cheeks. I flushed and mumbled away through the experience. She drew Bambly aside and spoke to him quietly, and when he returned to the sleigh, he was frowning. What? Well, it seems to think I'll leave you for dead at the first sign of trouble, he replied. Either that or devour you myself. She offered me a boon in exchange for your safety. I hope you said yes, I said unperturbedly. You can keep the money. I claim the silver sheep. He rolled his eyes. Moments later, after another round of tedious goodbyes, we were finally on our way. The sleigh glided smoothly over the snow, and we followed the road for the first hour. Two of the villagers went before us on horse, men who had been a part of the first search party. They showed us the place where Lila and Margaret had left the road, a spot where Karsgard rolled from the mountain and cast blue shadows over the wheel ruts and footprints. There, the men took their leave, as Bambly and I would continue on alone, having refused Odd's offer of a guard for us. The forest seemed to make a path for us as we followed the clear marks of trembling snow, as if the trees had shuffled aside to make way for whoever or whatever had passed there before us. Only in places was our way blocked, once by a tall birch that I could have sworn from a distance stood to the side of the clearing. Though boughs creaked and groaned, it felt as if the forest was slowly closing the path again, like healing a jagged wound. I got out and I walked with Shadow whenever the ground climbed over a hill to give the horses some relief. I looked back at my footprints in the snow, deriving some primitive form of satisfaction from seeing the marks that I had made on the unfamiliar world. Shadow was lopping at my side, who he left no tracks. He never really does. Bambly stayed put on the sleigh and he was wrapped in 2 blankets, and speaking only to complain about the cold. His nose turned a brilliant red from blowing it, the sound of which always seemed to coincide with moments when I was spellbound by the loveliness of the quiet, snowy woodside. Finally, I demanded that he eat one of Poe's cakes, and was relieved by his acquiescence, which spared me the effort of shoving it down his throat. The cake was warm to the touch, so soft that it might have just emerged from the oven, and it transformed Bambly's mood. He strode alongside the sleigh for the rest of the afternoon, without his blanket, scarf, face flushed with the warmth of absently brushing his hands through the boughs of the trees, or this or that. Whatever he touched burst into bloom, scattering the snow with leaves like beaten emeralds, red berries, willows, and seed cones, a riot of color and texture crackling within the white world before us. Soon enough, our little wilderness path could have been a grand avenue decked out for the return of the triumph procession. Birds hunkered down for a long winter and crept out of their burrows, chirping their alarmed delight as they grew drunk on berries. A narrow fox darted across our path, a starling clutched in its mouth, sparing us a dismissive glance as it sulked back into the velvet shadow. I tried very hard not to be awed by this flamboyant display of Wendell's. It was the first time that I'd seen him be free with his magic, and it left me feeling unsteady and on edge, and I realized that I was used to ignoring that part of him, or at least looking past it. As we crested a rise, I turned to see all the color unfurled across the sleeping landscape, trees jaunty and defiant even as the chilling winds snatched their leaves like nipping wolves. Toward the evening, we came to a mountain pass, and first the search party had stopped here. We could tell by the perturbance in the snow, a confusion of footprints and boot treads. We carried on a little further, following the ominous outline of a single set of hooves. The mountains on either side were volcanic and sharp, larger than any earthbound thing that might have a right to be. Their iced peaks surely closer to the stars than they were to us trudging specks. Were they alone at this point? I wondered aloud, and Bambley shrugged, perfectly unconcerned. He had donned his scarf and gloves again, but some of the ruddy warmth lingered in his face. Shall we stop for the night? I'm truly famished. I made him continue for another hour until we came to the heart of the pass. Bambley sighed heavily, but helped me unload the tent and tucked it into a fold of the mountain skirts where we would be protected from the weather. More sighing ensued as we made our fire and supper, a mix of dried meat and spices and vegetables that we were to boil with the melted snow. He stood there staring at the pot as if he had never seen one before, until I inquired as to whether he had ever had one in his life or cooked his own food, for certainly he would have been waited on more ostentatiously in his fairy kingdom than he was used to in the mortal realm, and at that he snapped, and he didn't see what difference it made, which was enough of an answer for me. I left him to it. The burned taste of stew was worth the enjoyment I derived from watching him flounder about, alternately burning and splattering himself. Afterwards, he retreated in a moody huff to the tent, shrouded himself in blankets that Odd had provided, where he then withdrew a needle and thread and proceeded to mend the minute tears in his cloak, muttering to himself and generally making a picture that was like some bizarre inversion of one of the hags of fate, weaving the future into their tapestries. He seemed like pointless industry to me, with nobody to see us but the foxes and the birds. But the task appeared to lift his spirits, or at least it shut him up, so I refrained from commentary. So apparently, because Bambley has some common fae in him, the ones that do like the cleaning, the cooking, the whatever, whenever he's upset, he darns clothes to make himself feel better. That's very funny. That's a cute little, like, you know, whatever. Guys, I think we're at the halfway point. Pretty much. Yeah, coping mechanism. Yeah, exactly. It's like his own little stimming, you know? It's very cute. 19th November. Wait, weren't we already on 19th November? Were we on 18 and I didn't realize it? Oh, I guess we were on 18. Okay, it's the next day. 19th November. I spent today alternating between scholarly excitement at this uncharted scientific territory we were entering and the dread that we would be too late, or worse, that we had never had a chance to start with. Lila and Margaret would have traveled more swiftly than us, unladen as they were, but I still worried that perhaps we had stumbled into a fairy trap without realizing it, and we were now doomed to wander the wilderness, chasing shadows and accomplishing exactly nothing. This is no trap, Bambley said, with such certainty in his green gaze that that much of my dread melted away. Only godforsaken cold and miles of uninhabitable wastes. He seemed unable to enjoy the stark beauty of it all, the wild terror of the mountains, the towering glaciers, the little ribbons of time that clung to the rocks that formed the frozen cataracts. The auroras danced above us, both nights, green and blue and white undulating together, a cold ocean up there in the sky, and even that he barely glanced at. On the second night, he used his magic to summon a thick green hedge of prickly holly and a trio of willow saplings that enfolded our tent in drapery like a bed curtain to keep out the chilly wind. Will you look at that? I couldn't help but exclaiming as I sat by the fire gazing up at the riot of light. I will admit I wished for him to share in this sight with me, and I was disappointed when he only sighed. Give me hills round as apples and forests such green that you could barely bathe in it, he said. None of these Hyperborean baubles. Baubles? I exclaimed, and I would have snapped at him, but his face as he gazed into the fire was open and forlorn, and I realized that he wasn't trying to be irksome to me. He just missed his home. He had been longing for it all along, and this place so alien and unfriendly had sharpened the longing into a blade. As usual, I had no idea what to do with this sort of insight. Would questioning him lighten the sadness, or would it make it worse? Should I attempt to hug him? In the end, I merely asked him to draw up an additional fencing to keep off the worst of the wind, as I knew he enjoyed using his powers thus, and he summoned a hedge so laden with bright berries that it put me into a mind of a Christmas tree, as well as entirely unnecessary carpet of snowdrops that was at my feet, which I suffered in silence. I kept my hand carefully hidden in my glove, not that I wished to. I wanted to yank it off and wave it in Bambley's face as a band of shadow that swirled there on my third finger, distinct enough now that I knew it for what it was, a ring. It filled me with terror, for the likes of which I had never felt before, but I couldn't tell him about it, nor could I give him any sign that might arouse suspicion. Oh, you think the Fairy King put a ring on her finger? Ooh, uh-oh. The enchantment, whatever it was, had me firmly in its grip. Even more worryingly, sometimes I forgot all about myself. I could only hope that it would not interfere with our expedition. I watched him out of the corner of my eye as he frowned at the fire, a crease between his beautiful dark eyebrows. Would he only grab me? And a flush rose up my neck. What reason would he have to do that? As usual, Wendell laughed at me when I announced my intention of visiting the restroom, but I didn't care. In the wilderness, one should cling to whatever dignity one can. I've always thought, anyway. Leaving him in shadow to enjoy the fire, I strode a distance from the camp and found a tree large enough to crouch behind. We had left the forest and all that remained of it, sad, mangy strands of birch here and there. I did my business quickly, and I hastened back over the snow. Looking back now, I wondered if I was observant enough. Certainly I was alert, I always am during field work, but I suspect that the unfamiliarity of the landscape, the high, dark mountains swaddled in snow, lulled me into a belief that no living thing could accost me here. Certainly nothing fey, creatures that I have spent my career associating with greenery and water and life. Fortunately, my reflexes are sharp. The instant the light flared through the trees, I halted, and I gripped my coin. It was a grayish light with no warmth in it. It was like a star. A wind moved through the trees, and there came a whisper of bells. Had I not been touching metal, I might have been bespelled, and as it was, my head still spun a little, but I'm used to brushing against such fairy enchantments, and I stood my ground. They were trooping fairies, and when I didn't fall under the spell of their music and move toward them, they grew intrigued, and they surrounded me. I knew instantly that I was in danger, for the fairies of the Boggle variety, a disputed category given to those common fae with deathly appearance, low intellect, and malevolent dispositions, while the Boggles are universally and perpetually ravenous, and yet they delight in desolate places, leading to the theory that they enjoy the sensation of hunger. When they do encounter living beings, they have every manner of unpleasant means to devour them, usually by roasting them part by part in little cook fires that they carry with them everywhere. Uh-oh, that's not good. They were tall for common fae, although some are of human height, and the tops of their heads nearing my shoulders, they were little more than bone with something resembling skin draped over top. But everything about them was planed, and angular, like ice chipped into a fairy shape. They didn't let me see them clearly, melting in and out of the snowdrifts as easily as Poe did with his tree, but what I saw was pale and hoary with frost, the cloaks woven from the moonlight. They had Poe's needle fingers and matching teeth. Some of them carried bells, and others carried their cook fires in little pots, gray-blue flames fed by the twigs that they snapped from the trees as they passed. They circled me a few times, getting my measure as they whispered to one another. Their voices were like the wind stirring the snow, and I could make no sense of them. It's not known if Boggles have speech in the human sense, as they are very close to animals. The scholar in me was already formulating questions in Fae, as I wished to learn all I could if they understood me. And not only that, I wanted to draw out the encounter in order to study them. But then, one of the Boggles was suddenly at my shoulder, its frigid, sharp hands squeezing my neck as it leaned in to take a bite of my ear. I caught a whiff of its breath, which smelled of pine, smoke, and blood, and before I jerked aside, spitting out one of the words of power, a little aside, What are the words of power? First described by Annabelle Levasseur, exceptionally powerful fae enchantments that uniquely can be cast not only by the courtly fae but also common fae and mortals, though their power is greatly diminished in this latter form. No one knows the origin of the words of power. At some point, some powerful fairy enchanter, an awkward term for the folk that have magic to one, but I simply refer to a fairy's particular skill at enchantment, and possibly Ivy Smith, who forms a prominent motif in the fairy art of southern England, created the words, telling them only to a few favored friends and allies. The oddest thing about the words, as Lesueur discovered in her interview with a dying member of the fairy court, is that they can be forgotten by the folk who learn them if they are not cast often enough, so use it or lose it. This is likely why they remain so obscure even to the folk. Otherwise, why would every power-hungry monarch not know them now and deploy them against their enemies? Not that the words have an obvious utility. Okay. Back to where we were. I have learned 2 of the words of power, extracted them through bribery from ancient folk who inhabited forlorn corners of the wilderness. One of the words is utterly useless. I stumbled across it while pursuing tales of a hag-type fairy in the Shetland Islands. Locals were uncertain if it was a banshee or some sort of disgraced runaway courtier of the courtly fae. I never did determine which was true. I came across her at twilight in a huddle of pale rags upon the beach, where she was nearly indistinguishable from a pile of driftwood. She asked me for shelter, which I gave her, of course, leading her back to the inn where I was staying, and I offered her my bed whilst I slept on the floor. I even washed her feet when she asked me to. They were very small and curved, like seashells. She was so ensconced in her rags and several layers of gowns that may or may not have been fine once, and a hooded cloak and several shawls, that I never did get a good look at her. When she asked me what favor I would like in return, I said that I was currently searching for the words of power, particularly those that would be useful to me, not really expecting her to know any, as few folk do. To my astonishment, she gave me one without argument, though after she went away, I worked out what it did. I was disappointed. The word has a single use, and that's retrieving lost buttons. Suffice to say, I've barely bothered with it, as I'm at a loss to explain why anybody would go to the trouble of devising such an enchantment. My conclusion, that's fairies for you. There is little use in summoning buttons in my present predicament, but fortunately, the second word that I learned lent the speaker a temporary invisibility. That is much more practical. Naturally, it had been far easier to track down than the one for the buttons. A few judicious bribes led me the tree of a wizened kobold, who gave me the word in exchange for a yearling calf. In any event, when I spoke this word, the boggles around me fumbled, shrieking in outrage. Unfortunately, the effect of the word is not long in its duration. Now, I have my pride. I believe that I could have dealt with the creatures myself, reasoned with them, offered a fair exchange for my safety, given time. I have done so before. But beliefs and coulds are not much comfort in such situations, and I am not arrogant enough to risk my life for pride with assistance so close at hand. So, I opened my mouth and I shouted, "Wendell!" The fairies took no notice of my cry. No doubt they were used to lost travelers screaming for help. One of them grabbed me by my cloak and wrenched me painfully back and forth, like an animal wishing to drag me into the ground. But I did not need to call for Wendell again, no. He stepped out from behind the tree, or perhaps from the tree, I didn't see. He reached a hand out and snapped the neck of the fairy gripping me, which I had not expected, and I staggered back from both him and the crumbling body, and he saw the mark on my neck, and his entire face darkened with something that seemed to go beyond fury, and it made him look like some feral creature. The fairies scattered like leaves, although they too were intrigued, but too stupid to run. "Are you hurt?" "No." I don't know how I made myself speak in this moment. I've seen Wendell angry before, but this was something that seemed to surge through him like lightning, threatening to burn everything in its path. He moved his hand, and a hideous tree rose up from the snow, dark and terrifying, all thorns and knife-sharp branches. The boughs darted out, and he skewered the fairies on them. "Oh, shit! He's pissed!" Once they were all immobilized and held squirming and screaming above the ground, he moved from one to the other, tearing them apart with perfect, calm brutality. Limbs, heart, other organs that I didn't recognize were scattered in the snow. He did not rush, but he killed them methodically while the others howled and writhed. I could not move. It was like watching people die, of course. Then the snow fairies breathed their last and they melted away like witches in a story. But it was bad enough. They, like a cat faced with an overabundance of wounded birds, he didn't even bother to finish them all, but he left some to flutter and bleed while he dealt with the others. When one broke away, the branch splitting it snapped under the weight, and he actually laughed, a sound with nothing human in it whatsoever, and he let the fairy think that it had escaped before calmly magicking him back to its path, and he tore it in two. The mad, focused fury left him almost as soon as he'd finished the last fairy to his satisfaction, and then he was shrugging off his cloak and exclaiming over the bloodstains that I couldn't see, for to my eyes they had just returned to water. He stomped off to a nearby spring in High Dungeon, not dungeon, dungeon. I don't know this word. Dudgeon, like a dungeon but with an extra D, leaving me staring at the last few twitching bodies. And then I realized that I couldn't sit there anymore, nor could I face him when he returned, so I staggered off into the wilderness. I paced around for perhaps half an hour, bile in my throat and tears that I could not explain stinging my eyes. Slowly, very slowly, the shudders ceased, and I grew calm and was able to see the situation rationally. My problem was clear. I had not yet learned to see Bambly as folk. No, not truly. Had I done, his display would not have shocked me so much. It's like Karen asking for a manager. It's ridiculous. For the sake of my sanity, not to mention for both of our safety, I had best reconcile my understanding of him, and very soon. When I got back, he was in the tent, mending his cloak yet again. I could not see that there was anything wrong with it, and I wondered if this obsessive turn had his habit taken a symptomatic of his inability to indulge his nature by making our present existence tidier and more homey in other respects. "Oh, there you are," he said, looking up at me in relief when I entered. His voice was ordinary, as if this appalling, violent frenzy of an hour before had been little more than a sneezing fit, something that would surely have terrified me to my bone had I not already been accustomed to his mercurial moods. I anticipated it. That's not to say that I wasn't terrified by it all. "I was just only out walking," I replied, removing my boots and settling myself into my blankets. "You needn't have worried." He continued to watch me. "Are you certain? When I returned, you were gone, and I wondered if I had scared you. I lost my temper, and I'm so sorry for it." I blinked, positively astonished by this display of self-reflection. Generally, that was a thing that Bambly seemed to repel. "You have nothing to apologize for. You were protecting me overzealously, it's true, but I would be foolish to fault you for that." I'm pleased to say that my voice only shook a little bit, and a few deep breaths were enough to settle it. He gave me an odd look, impressed, I think, at the same time that there was something sorrowful about it. Really, he had wanted me to run screaming from him in horror? Good grief. He said, "My dear dragon, here I thought that I would have to make amends somehow. I've made a start, I'm afraid." I followed his gaze to my pillow, upon which rested a thing that I didn't recognize, a woolen, oddly shaped thing, and I seized it abruptly, indignantly. It was my jumper. What have you... "I'm sorry," he said, not looking up from the flicker and the flash of the needle, "but you can't expect me to live in close proximity to something that barely deserves the word. It's inhumane." I shook out the jumper, gaping. I could hardly tell it was the same garment. Yes, it was the same color, and the wool itself seemed to be altered, becoming somehow softer and finer without losing any of its warmth. It wasn't the baggy square anymore. It would only hang a little loosely on me now, while clearly communicating the lines of my figure. "From now on, you'll keep your damned hands off my clothes," I snapped, and then I flushed, realizing how that sounded, but Bambly took no notice of it. "Do you know that there are men and women who would hand over their firstborns to have wardrobes tended to by a king of fairies?" he said, calmly snipping at a thread. "Back home, every courtier wanted a few moments of my time." "King?" I repeated, staring at him, and yet I was not hugely surprised. It would explain his magic. King or queen fairy, as the stories say, can tap into the power of their realm, and yet that power, while vast, is not thought to be limitless. There are tales of kings and queens falling for human trickery, and Bambley's exile is, of course, an additional testimony. Oh, he tucked his needle and thread back into his sewing box. Well, it only lasted a day. My coronation was promptly followed by an assassination attempt, and then you see my dear stepmother forced me to flee the mortal world. To the mortal world. He laid down and he closed his eyes. It was an eventful day. I did your other cloak too, by the way. God. But he was already asleep, so I could not harangue him any further, allowing me relief, and I suddenly wondered if that had not been his intention all along, of being too angry with him to even be frightened anymore? Guys, the next page is an unknown date. Look at that. Usually it says, like, whatever the date is here, and then November. This one has a question mark. They have lost track of their days. Yikesers. Okay. Well then. Not great. I agree. Not great. Much as I hate to sully these pages with melodrama, the reality is that these may be the last words I write. I don't know how much time I have, nor how much longer I shall be able to hold this pen, so I will attempt to be concise. Last night, if last night it was, the movement of time is impossible to gauge in fairy, I woke to the sound of the accursed tree that Bambley summoned scraping the fabric of the tent, the echoes of the Boggles in their death throes, as if the tree had gathered up their screams and kept them like souvenirs. Well, try sleeping after that. I fumbled for my pocket watch and found that it was not yet 6. Dawn was a long way off. I looked around for Shadow and found the turncoat curled up against Bambley. The dog lifted his head, though, at the sound of my stirring, and Wendell was little more than a pile of blankets. He had the lion's share of them. Still, he awoke, complaining of the cold. I could just make out a tuft of golden hair sticking out from the cracks between 2 quilts. I went outside thinking that I might rouse a fire and have an early breakfast. The horses were pressed up against each other, their rumps facing the banked coals. Above us, the aurora was bleeding. I stood frozen, the long ribbons of white unfurled all the way to the ground, growing filmier as they went. The green and blue of the auroras was unaffected. It was as if something were drawing the silvery whiteness down to the earth like fingers pulling paint down a canvas to place just beyond the curve of the mountain less than a mile away. For several minutes I did nothing. I merely stood there, carting through possibilities and plans. Once I had chosen a course, I thought on it for several minutes more, and then I ducked back into the tent, dressed, tucking my notebook into my pocket out of habit, and I took out the golden chain that I kept tucked at the bottom of my book bag, which I had managed to keep hidden from Bambley this whole time. It has long been a source of amusement to me that he's never had any suspicions about Shadow. I placed the collar at the end of the chain around Shadow's neck, and he sat up, perfectly silent and understanding my intention in that uncanny way of his. Wendell did not stir, and given his habits, I doubted that he would any time soon. I draped my own blankets over top him to further increase his comfort. In addition to his hair, an elbow, a cheekbone, and a dark eyelashed eye were visible. I brushed my fingers through his hair, partly because I'd always nursed a foolish desire to do so, and partly by way of apology to him. After all, I might not return from my errand, and if so, he would never forgive me. He might not forgive me even if I did return, but I could not risk taking him along after that display of his yesterday. Like all the folk, Wendell is unpredictable, and I had no way of knowing if he would fly into another deranged fury if one of the courtly fae laid a finger on me, and he would land us in trouble for which we could not extricate ourselves. He had admitted before that he didn't know if he was a match for them. Despite his power, there was only one of him, and that could easily be one too many given his utter lack of self-control. No, in this case, I needed level-headedness, and for that, I could count on only myself. Oh, I think she just woke up. I donned my snowshoes and set out with Shadow at my side. The leash kept on the dog kept the dog close to me, no further than the space of 3 of my strides. I glanced back only once. One of the horses eyed me with a sort of relieved disgust. I was mad, but I hadn't forced him to leave the warmth of the coals, at least. The murderous tree leaned itself over the tent like a doting mother, looking obscenely fat and somehow pleased with itself. The sight was enough to tamp down my doubts. We walked and walked, my snowshoes softly crunching through the crust of the ice laid over the drifts. The mountains slumbered, disturbed only by the fitful touch of the wind, which skimmed small fogs of snow from their slopes. The auroras tumbled to the ground in bursts like silver rain. It was falling into the valley between 2 great roots of a jagged mountain. I became aware that we had been walking a long time without our destination growing any closer. We were outside the enchantment, and I needed a way in. I let the leash unfurl so that Shadow strode 4 paces away from me, and then 5, and slowly light grew near. We had stepped into their realm. As soon as I was certain, I drew Shadow to me again, and as we moved deeper into the fairy world, Shadow had grown larger. He was now twice the size, his muzzle coming up to my chest, his snout was sharp, wolfish, his paws enormous, but he followed me as calmly as ever, his black eyes trusting. I climbed carefully up the last slope, bending low, and I found a volcanic boulder to crouch behind, and I peeped out. Below us was a frozen lake. It was perfectly round, a great gleaming eye in which the moon and stars were mirrored, lanterns glowing the same white as the auroras dangling from the lampposts made out of ice, which framed its path from the lake's edge to a scattering bench of merchant stands draped in bright awnings of opal and blue. Delicious smells floated on the wind, smoked fish, fire-roasted nuts and candies, spiced cakes, a winter fair. Asterisk. Outside of Russia, almost all known species of courtly fae and many common fae are also fond of fairs and markets. Indeed, such gatherings appear in stories as interstitial spaces between their worlds and ours, and it is thus not particularly surprising that it is a feature in so many encounters with the folk. The characters of such markets, however, vary wildly from sinister to benign. The following features are universal, however. Number 1, dancing, which the mortal visitor may be invited to partake in. Number 2, a variety of vendors selling foods and goods which the visitor will be unable to recall afterward. More often than not, the markets take place at night. Numerous scholars have attempted to document these gatherings. The most widely referenced accounts are of Balthasar Lenz, who successfully visited 2 fairs in Bavaria before his disappearance in 1899. Bavaria is very fairy-like. The folk were gliding upon the ice, strolling easily from stand to stand, and they were not as strange as I had expected. In fact, when I fixed my eyes upon them directly, they looked perfectly mortal, if a little too lovely and graceful, but when viewed slantwise, they were figures of ice and ash, ashes gone gray and frozen, nice slender wraiths that at times were not even there, becoming features in the landscape, a phenomenon that I had observed with Poe, of course. Their hair was universally silky and white, not like human hair at all, but that of a snow fox or a hare, and their eyebrows, too, while some had fine cover of the same hair, or perhaps it was fur, it was visible on the backs of their hands, and it disappeared beneath their cuffs. I heard no music. The folk upon the ice danced and glided to the same song that was much clearer, but Shadow's presence had made me oblivious to it. Naturally, there was a part of me that wished it were otherwise. I wished I could have been like Odysseus, tied to the mast of his ship, but I had no ship, no sailors to stop me from drowning myself. I itched for my notebook and camera. I suppose it was cold of me with Lila and Margaret down there possibly being devoured, but I have vowed to be honest in these pages even to the last. For some time, I simply watched the folk, and I thought nothing about the girls. I thought about Bouchard's discovery of a curious stone slab in Rosetta, and Gadmer peeping through the trees at Goblin City. Was this what they had felt? It was awe, of course, mingled with a stunned belief. I suppose that when one spends their career working toward a goal, constructing all sorts of fantasies about what that goal will look like and feel like, one is left a little senseless when the scaffolding comes crashing down around them. Eventually, I forced my thoughts back to the missing girls. It didn't take long to find 2 mortals among the sea of folk, alternating beautiful and horrifying as they were, gliding together along the ice. They could have just been 2 ordinary young people in love, Margaret's pretty head resting on Lila's shoulder, but they moved like dolls on strings. Their smiles were blank and insipid. Occasionally, Lila would look up, and a frown of confusion would push through the smile. I took heart from this, that there still might somehow be a way to save them. I didn't try to sneak into the fair. How utterly pointless that would have been. I simply plastered my own blank smile onto my face and I wandered over. Luck was with me, and I managed to find a fairy couple to trail behind at first like a child after its parents, so that the other folk assumed that these two had brought me. They smiled at me, and I smiled back as if I didn't see the hunger in their eyes, but in truth, it took my breath away, and I faltered a few times, feeling sick. I began to shake at one point, for there was no difference between this and strolling into a forest filled with tigers. Shadow, prowling at my side, saved me in more ways than the obvious one. I counted his breaths as they fogged out the swaying of his tail as he walked. It was an old trick that I used to clear my head of enchantment, and now I use it to stop myself from running screaming back into the wilderness. Okay, well, there's a lot more going on, and it sounds like she's woken up from an hour-long nap, which means she's going to need to be fed. So we will continue this tomorrow. For those keeping track, we are on page 174, which is rock and roll. For anyone who doesn't know, who's listening later, after we finish this book, we are going back to the 3 books for Tale of Magic. Yeah, chugging along. But then we don't have, I don't think we have another book planned for after Tale of Magic series. So if anyone wants to make suggestions, we can take a vote on, like, if a couple people make suggestions, we can vote on what to do next after those 3. I know it'll take a little while to do those, but probably, like, I would imagine once we finish this one, which looks like it'll be one more week, I'd say the 3 Tale of Magic books, if everything goes normal, probably a month and a half. Oh, right, Percy Jackson. I totally forgot about that. Yes, okay. We did say we wanted to try Percy Jackson, so I'll get some of those. Yeah. All right, well, I'll see you all tomorrow.